I rose earlier to question the Minister of Environment on the emissions cap, which is essentially a production cap, Mr. Speaker. One of the tenets, or one of the main issues that we're facing with here is we're looking at over 54,000 job losses and over $20 billion in lost investment into the Canadian economy. And this is on top of the hundreds of thousands of job losses that have already occurred in the energy and resource sector because of this Liberal government's anti-energy policies that was led by Justin Trudeau for the past 10 years, and now the current Prime Minister is following in his steps. And what we are seeing as well from the current Environment Minister, I've served on committee with her before, and she is actually very vocal about her opposition to any expansion of the oil sands, and quite frankly on committee she's been very deliberate in trying to suppress the oil and gas industry. And I just was looking at some more numbers, Mr. Speaker. Back in 2022, for example, $45 billion in revenue from the oil and gas sector alone went to Canadian governments. $45 billion. In 2022, that would have just slightly trailed healthcare, the cost of healthcare. So if you think about it that way, the oil and gas sector, the money that comes into governments from that is equal to right around the same amount of dollars as healthcare. There's many great businesses and companies in our ridings who support the local healthcare foundations that work in the oil and gas sector. They sponsor our local hockey rinks. They sponsor our community centers, our senior centers. This is the money that funds education. It funds nurses. It funds doctors. The government today has tabled a bill on fixing the borders and the ports, for example. Funding from the oil and gas sector is what will be used to hire some of these agents that are going to be needed to fix a lot of these solutions. They are deliberately trying to cap the single biggest driver of the Canadian economy with their emissions cap, which is a production cap. Now, if this cap stays in place, which the Prime Minister has already committed to doing, and I would assume his silence on the matter only confirms that, the oil production in Canada is actually going to have to curtail by 5% in the next couple of years. And when you look at a 5% reduction, and yet you look at what the rest of the world is wanting and needing. The rest of the world, they've come to Canada numerous times looking for Canadian gas, looking for Canadian oil, looking for LNG. And Justin Trudeau repeatedly said, no, there's no business case, despite the fact that numerous countries came to Canada begging for it. And we have industry wanting to have export pipeline capacity so we can reduce our dependence on the United States for selling our product. And this production cap that's in place is going to just further hamper Canada's ability to be the supplier of clean, reliable energy around the world. Just wondering if the government would be willing to admit that this production cap is a terrible idea. They need to scrap it.
Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that the Government of Canada is committed to making our country an energy superpower. I think we can agree about that. I say this at a time when our new government is laying the groundwork to build projects of national significance while fighting climate change and defending our economic sovereignty. And if we want our country to remain competitive over the long term, we must not only diversify our country's energy production, but also offer to produce oil and gas with the lowest possible emissions. By decarbonizing oil and gas production, we will position Canada as a supplier of choice for fossil fuels in a future that prioritizes low-carbon sources of production. For example, the European Union plans on imposing a fee on high methane imports of oil and gas. Mr. Speaker, the clean energy revolution represents a tremendous economic opportunity for Canada to be more globally competitive while fighting climate change. I believe no Canadian wants our country to be left behind. Enabling Canada to become the world's leading energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy will in turn sustain hundreds of thousands of good careers in the skilled trades. And despite the many economic challenges Canada is currently facing, we must not forget that the climate change emergency remains. We need to look no further than the massive impacts that forest fires are having on communities and families in Western Canada today. We can't simply let up on the fight against climate or our climate fight. The time is now to make a difference and ensure we have the best possible future for everyone.
The honourable member for Swift Current Grasslands Kindersley.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what would make Canada competitive would be a competitive regulatory framework. Now, the Impact Assessment Act, the one that's been ruled unconstitutional already, and the government says they made a little bit of changes to it, but we know that there still are other unconstitutional elements still in place, is one of the biggest barriers, one of the biggest problems. We're trying to get approvals here in Canada, taking over a decade to be able to get an approval on a major project. That's why there are no major projects being built in Canada here today. The first thing that the Prime Minister is going to have to do is get rid of the emissions cap, but also to fix the Impact Assessment Act. Down in the United States, they get approvals. President Biden, 3 years ago, gave an order to make sure approvals were handed out in less than 2 years on big projects. This House is called, and our party, in fact, especially our critic from Lakeland, has been very vocal about the need to match that, but even do better than that and try to get approvals even quicker. Because if we're going to be competing with the United States for investment dollars, we need that regulatory certainty. We're not getting it.
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, every sector of the economy in Canada should be doing its fair share when it comes to limiting pollution, and that includes the oil and gas sector. Canada's largest oil and gas companies are already committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2050, and I applaud them. Our measures are working. Canada's greenhouse gas pollution is going down. In every sector of the economy, Canadian workers are lowering greenhouse gas pollution in a way that creates good jobs and cleaner air. In the face of the increased flooding, wildfires, and hurricanes from a changing climate, the government will continue to work with the oil and gas sector, with provinces, territories, stakeholders, Indigenous communities to promote clean innovation and the adoption of technologies to reduce emissions, including carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.